My name's Katie Costello. I'm a Soul Midwife, a funeral celebrant and an accredited death educator. So I've been supporting the dying for 11 years. I've seen death. I've been with people as they take their last breath. I just want people to know this stuff. And I have a very unique role working in death and dying for 11 years. So because I see it and I'm on the front line, I can educate from that human perspective.
Hi, welcome to Room to Grieve podcast. We're your hosts, Karen and Bec. Grab yourself a cuppa, find a comfortable spot, and we'll journey through grief together.
Thank you so much for joining Karen and I today. This whole podcast thing, as we said to you, is very new to us.
Hello, thank you for having me on. I'm a Soul Midwife, a funeral celebrant and an accredited death educator. It sounds strange, I know, to say that, but yeah, we are about. A Soul Midwife is essentially an end-of-life companion, so we support people from diagnosis right through to death and afterwards. A funeral celebrant is the person that stands at the front, basically, at a funeral or celebration or memorial, and I help piece a service together with families or people in whichever way they choose, because you've actually got an abundance of choices. So a big part of my role is to advocate and share and educate about what's available. And that also then links into the death education. So I've been supporting the dying for 11 years. I've seen death. I've been with people as they take their last breath. I've been there in the day, minutes, days, but weeks, months and years before, as well as then after. I get it and I see it, and we don't talk enough. So that was a big motivation for the education, was to hopefully put it out there in a very human way. You know, it's not about jargon. It's not about clinical. Death is a human event. It's not a medical or clinical one. And we've forgotten that. So all of that I've put together to create an education course for everybody, whether it be personally or professionally. I just want people to know this stuff. And I have a very unique role working in death and dying for 11 years. So because I see it and I'm on the front line, I can educate from that human perspective.
But it's topics and conversations that are really important to us, that we really want to share more and talk about more. And as you said, we don't talk about death and dying half as much as we need to. And as a society, we tend to shy away from it rather than be prepared for it, right? And we need to relearn all those things. And I think actually we had, as a society, if you look back 100 years ago, I think we've lost that over the last 100 years.
I think as a society, I think we've become very divorced and detached from death. And we were very used to, there's a saying, it takes a village. So when somebody died, it would be that the family, the butcher dropped off the meat, the greengrocer dropped something off, the priest came in, the kids were running round. It was very much a community event. That's how it was. That's how it is in many other cultures and societies. It's just we seem to have forgotten that. And that's very much where the soul midwifery comes in. We're trying to bring death almost back into the heart of the home, bring that community, that village back together, to realise that if we talk more and support each other more, it makes the whole hideous, awful, heavy process, I'm not going to say easier, but maybe gentler and a bit more human, rather than it being further away over there. You're connected to it.
Yeah, a bit more understanding. We're passionate about getting grief spoken about in schools, and start as early as we possibly can, because kids are like sponges, aren't they? And they just get it. They accept it. And if they understand it as well, we're halfway there, aren't we? You know, instead of isolating them from death, if we can do it right, if we can get it right and tell them right at the age-appropriate way, surely it's got to benefit everybody.
I think we're stronger together, isn't it? The more people...
And it's nice that we know we're on the right page. We know we're going in the right direction, because you're professionals. We're not professionals. We've just lived it,
which is hugely valuable, though. And this is where it's the stronger together thing.
Yeah,
we all have our own experiences of grief, but when it comes to you guys, with the challenging stuff that you've gone through, and I know challenging is not even the word, but that is more valuable sometimes than the professionals.
Yeah,
the professionals, you can have all the paperwork and all the qualifications and all the diplomas that you like. But actually, if you're not coming from the heart, for whatever reason, if you're not coming from the heart, you don't get to make a difference in the same way. And that's where the impact of you guys being willing to share your stuff is going to be so, so powerful.
That means so much to us, Katie, because at the beginning we were thinking, well, who'll listen to us? What do we know? We've got no qualifications in it. And it was actually my psychotherapist, and he said, you've got the ultimate qualification, unfortunately. Absolutely. So we have our, we've grown, haven't we, Bec? We've done so much more in the background, which we're working on, and it is all about grief education and starting young and supporting young, and it's just going to be generation upon generation then that it moves through, surely.
Well, I think it goes back to that thing that I said like 100 years ago. It was something that we were all well aware of, because death was something that happened in the home, wasn't it? It was something that happened all around us. And so you grew up sort of with death being a part of everyday life. And then I think as medicine's kind of progressed and hospitals and science and everything, got better, hospitals became a place that you went to survive as opposed to a place that you went to die. And then from that, I think we created this real weird ideology that we need to avoid death, we need to escape death, because death is the ultimate failure. When actually death is the only thing that's going to happen. There's two things that connect all of us, birth and death, right? Yet we see death as something to run away from.
I think you're so right, and I think this is. So I'm getting very excited. I love having conversations with people that get it. Doctors, nurses, hospitals, medicine, science, research, incredible. The NHS, amazing. We're so lucky to have all that. But the only downside is that with this incredible medicine and treatment, we've created this failure, exactly that, Bec, mentality. And we've lost sight of the fact that death is natural. Death is normal. Now, granted, the age or reason we die is not something normal that we can get our head around. But when it comes to the natural cycle of life, if that, or when it comes to the point where we can't fight, and I use air quotes, anymore, there has to be a level of acceptance that this is going to happen. And what happens is in society, like we said, we're divorced, we're detached, it's over there, the doctors, if they can't fix it, we've failed. That's where then we create the fear. And we don't have this openness now to sit with it and look at it physically and emotionally. We seem to have lost this ability to just be and accept that death is there.
Yeah.
And I think, though, that a lot of the work I do with people as well, obviously, is end of life, but it's even before that, to work on and accepting the idea that death happens, grief sucks, no matter what the situation, a broken heart is irreplaceable most of the time. You can't fix that. But then that changes you. Then it's a new way of life. It's a weird, horrible new normal. But so to even understand that, we have to embrace it sooner. And we don't realise that actually doing it sooner has a knock-on effect later on in our grief journey. Sorry, again, I went off tangent there. But you can see what I think. So all of these reasons, the doctors, the medicine, it's incredible. But then we suddenly think, oh, well, I've got some awful cancer. Well, that's fine. The doctors will fix me. Yeah, fingers crossed they will. But what about if they don't? Then what do you want your death to look like? What's your priority? What comforts you? What soothes you? What's important to you? What do you want? What don't you want? Like, we need to shift that and at least have the conversation to go.
Or at least to normalise the conversations. Because I know, when Bradley was dying, that he was so scared of dying. He was so anxious and scared, and what that did to his mental health was horrific to watch. It was probably the worst part of our journey, was how he mentally did not cope. It was tough, wasn't it, Karen, in those?
So, yeah, it was absolutely horrific. That we said that your situation with Bradley helped me come to terms with the fact that we didn't tell Emily. Emily was 16, and we took it upon ourselves not to tell her because we know Emily. And our Macmillan nurse said, what are you going to do? Are you going to tell? And I said, no. She said, thank God for that. She said, I know Emily. I've known Emily for 2.5 years, and I think that's the right decision, which made us feel better. So how would your service come in? How would you be able to help a family with a child that they didn't want to tell the child? How could you help on that type of thing?
Oh, I guess, my heart breaks for you both just thinking about it, and I won't think about it too much because we'll all be a blubbering wreck. But I think this is the thing. I don't necessarily help, I just am. So right. I think the big thing is that I can help people just feel less alone. It's not my place to ever say to anybody what I think is right or wrong, because I can see, listening to both of you, the two very different situations. And again, my heart is with you both. I have no judgment. It's not up to me to decide what's right or wrong for somebody else's situation, child, spouse, parent, whatever. So my job is very much just being with somebody or a family member or a person to just be with them through those difficult decisions, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
Because again, you do feel that, have I done the right thing? Should I have done differently?
And it's just that whole education piece while you're going through it. Like, there's so much that goes on around your child when they're ill, when they're at end of life, that doesn't make any sense. And you don't always have the headspace or the inclination to say, what's this? But it's things that ruminate with you afterwards of like, well, what was that? Why did they do that? Why didn't I ask this? I didn't understand that. And it's those kind of things that eat away at you a little bit and can cause those guilt and all those ongoing things that then don't help afterwards.
Yeah, it's also conflicting information that we're given, because even George's mum that was on the other day, George and Bradley were both told that they had to tell, not had to tell, but advised, I suggest you tell them. George was he 12?
George was 12, Bradley was 17 when he was diagnosed, and they were both told they had a 0% chance of survival. They were both told to go away and make memories, and they were both told they were going to die. And I think that should be a really personal decision on whether you're told that or you're not.
We was never told that. We was always given support and help to make decisions, but they all kept everything nice in appointments. She's going through brain surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy. She's poorly. Why does she need to be told it's going to end?
Oh, and like you said, I don't know what's right or wrong, but my heart, I wanted to cry then as well when you said about George and 12. My son's 12.
Yeah,
that's
when it hits home.
If God forbid, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if I got that news that there was something going and 0% and all of that stuff, I honestly don't know what I'd do. But I can see my head going to both of your. Do you know what I mean? Well, I don't know what's right. And again, I think the magnitude of that weight then of knowing, all we want to do is protect our little people.
Yeah.
And, my mum still calls me her baby. I'm 42.
Yeah.
So I remember my dad also had a heart attack about, 20 years ago. He told me he was in the hospital because he had a funny turn. He still wanted to protect me. He didn't tell me. But when I was younger, I was angry. Now, I get it. And also what I appreciate now is, again, somebody else had a very similar situation, said, oh my God, I can't believe your dad didn't tell you. That's awful. I'd want to know. And I was like, oh God, I wanted to know. But now, especially doing the work that I do, seeing things in a completely different light, through a different lens, I know why dad didn't tell me. And actually, he also did that to protect himself. If he did die or didn't wake up from the op and all that, then he didn't actually have to face those conversations full stop. And that's how he needed to do it.
Yeah.
So I think this is twofold. My role as well is to help you guys or somebody alongside somebody going through loss. But it's also, like, maybe not in the kids situation, but, with people that are dying, is to support how they want this to go.
Yeah.
How they want this to run.
We can educate, we can talk about it, and we can put things into place. But when it comes to it, it's very, very personal, and it will be down to that person on that day on how they do it. But if they've got all the information available, they've got choices.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where we need to educate, and just talk about it more, so that when we do have a difficult choice, we can sit and think about it, take advice, and just have that bit more knowledge to make that decision.
Absolutely, and these choices should be shared and discussed sooner. So that's a big part of what I do on social media, is I share about funeral choices. I share about the fact that you can decide if you want to die at home, in a hospice, or in a hospital or nursing home. I talk about the fact that, what medicine might be available, how you might experience death, because then we can start going, oh, okay, so if this is potentially what might happen, how do I feel about staying at home to die? And I always think about myself and my son. It's just the two of us here. right now, I don't want to die at home because I feel for him that he wouldn't cope with me dying here. But he also wouldn't want me to go anywhere too soon. So I'll happily be looked after at home until I get too poorly and then go somewhere ideally like a hospice or even a nursing home if it meant that it was protecting my son. But I know that because I know all this stuff. I live in this world. And this is the big part of what I do as well, is share those choices.
Yeah.
But it's so important that we do it in everyday life.
Why wait until things could change, couldn't they, Katie?
Exactly.
That's your decision now.
Yes.
But in 10 years' time...
But it's having that information available to you to allow you to make those choices, isn't it?
Talking about your son.
Yeah. And this is why, again, what you guys are doing with the podcast, what I do, what so many other people, we're all trying to get the word out there because unfortunately, for whatever reason, we know the benefits of understanding our choices. We know what we wish we maybe would have had or how we wish or hope things could have been. So, and this is the problem. It takes a lot of this stuff to proverbial to hit the fan before we go, oh, heck, hold on. I didn't know that I had to think about this. But that's why if we do it in everyday life while we're well, we're clear-headed, we're coming from a place of rationale, from logic, from understanding, and we're not doing it from a place of fear, grief, anger, pain, physical or emotional. And that makes all of those, all of that knowledge and information so overwhelming when you've got all that heavy emotion. Now, we can all have a conversation like this now and discuss choices about where you want to die and what you want to do. Because at this precise moment in time, we're all in a very calm space.
Yeah.
And it makes those things so much easier. And when people worry about, I can't bring that up with my parents, you'd be surprised the amount of times when that happens, they go, oh my God, you'll never guess what? My mum had actually been waiting for me to ask. Or, because again, you assume it's difficult for the other person, but actually more often than not, it's difficult for us.
Yeah.
We go, I can't bring that up with so-and-so because they'll get upset. Will they? Or do you just feel uncomfortable? Like, it's okay. It's very normal to feel uncomfortable. But once you broach that, once you break down that door or crack it open just a little bit, most people are so surprised at actually the magic that comes out of those conversations. Oh, my dad told me he wanted to be cremated. I never thought that. I thought he'd want to be buried. Oh, it's amazing. Talking to my sister, I found out that actually she wants a big party for her funeral. I thought she'd want something quiet. That in itself, those key bits of information can carry so much weight later on when you need them.
Yeah, that comfort for you that at least in those, the final thing that you were able to do for them in that celebration of their life, in however you choose to do that actually you did something fitting and something honouring. That's guilt and regret. I'm sure you'll probably tell us that. I know for Karen and I, they're huge things that you carry when you lose somebody, and sometimes it can be over the silliest of things. So if you can mitigate any of that anywhere along the journey, then it makes sense to make that easier for everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think grief by its very nature, even in the absolute best, and I use air quotes, of circumstances, comes with guilt. It's just part of this icky, heavy, thick of emotion. Like, you're going to feel guilt, even if you've done everything as you should have done, everything, air quotes, right. Even if you had all the answers, for some reason, that's just part of the grief. So we know it's there, even in, like I said, the very best of situations. So, God, that one unanswered question that you had, that suddenly becomes the heaviest thing and changes your whole grief trajectory, if you like. It changes everything about how you experience your life going forward with that grief. But I don't think we appreciate that until, unfortunately, like you guys have been in it, until we lose somebody, until we have that experience of, oh, I didn't know. Mum never talked about it. I never had that conversation with my husband. What do I do now? All of those things. So a big part, again, of what you guys are trying to do here, I can feel it, and what I'm doing, and so many of us, is to get people to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, do it now, because we know the impact of not having it later on. And when I see it, and people come back to me however many days, weeks, months, years, maybe after I've supported them, and not everybody has the answers. I've supported many difficult, really challenging situations, young people, dodgy dynamics in a family, estranged relationships, all sorts. There's no family is perfect, by the way, just putting it out there. There is no such thing. So we've all got something. We've all got stuff. We've all got baggage and stuff that makes us who we are. when I see, if we can make one iota of difference while somebody's still here, with one question, one conversation, one post-it note even, of a hint of something that how that person feels about music at their funeral, or don't put me in a nursing home, or I want to die looking out the window, whatever. This could be one thing. I know the magnitude of that later on. I know the benefit. And that might seem silly to say benefit in grief, but it does have a huge benefit, because that one answered question that was seemingly insignificant then is the most significant thing after somebody's died. And I just wish I could get that across to people.
Yeah.
You know, sorry, getting on a slight tangent.
I do have
Oh God. Oh God. I'm bracing myself for whatever's coming next. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't want to be buried, and I don't want to be cremated.
Ooh.
I want to be stuffed.
You want to be stuffed? What the fuck for? Where are we going to go?
You're not supposed to swear. You've done really well.
Where are we going to put you?
I want to be stuffed, and I want to be stood next to the fireplace, leaning on the
fucking
fireplace.
melt.
Right? It's to stop swearing. Right?
What? You blew me away. What the?
You won't be able to be embalmed, Karen, because you'll be flammable.
Has Rob just got to keep hold of you forever?
Yeah, he's not allowed anybody else. He's got to sit looking at me. When he comes in, puts the telly on at night, he's got to give me a nod and then put what I want on.
And I reckon that you're going to be stuffed to like a size 6 as well, aren't you? You've probably got rules on what size your boobs have got to be, your waist has got to be.
It's the only time I'll ever be slim.
Yeah, I was going to say, God, if I made that choice, I'd want them to take the stuffing out.
Do you know what? There were so many things that I've realised since Bradley died, since looking into all of this education and this research and everything that we've done, that I hadn't realised when Bradley did die. We just opted for a funeral and a cremation and all the rest of it. But I hadn't actually realised quite how much other variation of choices there are out there. And I probably didn't look wide enough because I wasn't really aware of them. I mean, we knew when Bradley was diagnosed, we very much said, well, you know, oh God, it's awful. You start planning their bloody funeral when they're still alive. But it was very much like, we will just have a cremation for him and we'll have a big party. And then throughout Bradley's illness, he very much turned religious to God, and that was something he did, his choice. He found great comfort in prayer, in saying prayers, and he made relationships with friendships with people who were very religious, and he found great comfort in having those friendships with those people that could guide him in religion. And that was something that, you know, he made the choice to do. He very much believed he was going to be with God. And so then it became a really obvious choice when he died that we would have his funeral service in a church. But, you know, at the very beginning when he was diagnosed, we were hell-bent that that wasn't going to happen. But then I suppose because he did know he was going to die, they were conversations that we'd had because he'd asked about where he was going to go, what was going to happen when he was going to die, if he was going to stay in contact with us, and, you know, what did we think it would look like, and what do we think it would feel like. And they were all really, really difficult conversations to have. But in, like what we've said, some of those conversations I am grateful we got to have, because it allowed us to make some choices and take some comfort from some of the things that we could do for him afterwards, you know.
And that's it. And they obviously, mixed emotions, isn't it? Like you said, you're grateful to have had them, but equally that there's still unanswered questions maybe, or there's the what ifs or if onlys. But I think even if now it still feels icky, knowing those things, I think when as you go through life with this grief now, I think there's those moments where you look back and there will be peace and comfort that you find in a different way as your grief evolves and your life evolves. So I think they're not always obvious blessings, or they're not always obvious, oh, lovely, that helps, I feel wonderful now. You know, it's not that, is it? There's those little moments of glimmers, they call them, don't they? Those little glimmers that come out later on. And I think we may not see them straight away. And we may not even feel them, or even believe that, you know, how can any good come out of a conversation with my person and they've died? And yeah, I might have known what to do, but actually I don't give two hoots about that. You know, there's all sorts of feelings. as we move through life with, like I said, I don't ever think you don't move on. It changes you. You are now this person without your little people with this grief. It encompasses you now. Those glimmers become clearer as your journey goes on. And again, you don't see it or feel it at the time, because why would you? Because you've gone through the most hideous thing. There will be those magic moments. And I believe they're gifts. So by you, whether you did or didn't have the conversation, the gifts were had. So, by Bradley finding a comfort in faith, you had comfort knowing that he had comfort.
Yeah.
Knowing that you had that church service made you go, do you know what? He found this connection and we honoured that. You gifted him that because he found that faith, and he gave you a gift by allowing you, to sharing that with you, that's where he found his comfort. That's a gift. And even with your daughter, to not have that and to not have those conversations was a gift between you, because that was right for your relationship.
Yeah. She was very spiritual, but she didn't believe in God, but she believed in the afterlife. She spoke to people. She spoke to a lady in the corner of the room for the last 2 weeks of her life.
Wow.
And I think half the time was just to scare her Uncle Anthony, but she still had a sense of humour right to the end.
Sounds like my kind of girl.
You know what? In turn, with Emily being like that too, that was a gift that Emily gave me as well.
Yeah.
Because she allowed me to sort of open myself up to her way of beliefs and that, which I probably had never really looked into, considered, and it gave me a lot more of an understanding of sort of the spiritual life and maybe that way of thinking. So that was sort of a gift that I feel very much that Emily sort of imparted on us and us as a family as well.
She still carries on giving you that gift.
Yes.
Even though you hate black cats.
Yes.
Yes. Cats.
Yeah, and I tell Emily not to send me black cats, and she still sends me black cats, and she sends me just Emily a lot on a number plate, and it just says M. Or even the other day, there was just a car that literally was spelt JU57EMS, just M's. And when you think, yeah, she does it all the time. But the cats is her favourite because I hate them.
They're either locked in the garage. Yeah.
Yeah. So I talk to Bradley and Emily all the time. We're going totally off track here, but I'll tell you this story quickly anyway. And I was driving home from work and I was chatting away to Bradley and Emily like I do. And I said to Emily, look, Emily, I'm really sick of the cats. Like, I'm not a huge cat fan. Please stop sending me cats. Bradley sends me his name a lot. Can you just send me your name? Like, car reg will do. She hadn't sent me any car registrations at this time. When I got home, Simon was standing on the driveway and I was like, what are you doing? He was like, well, the neighbours just come round and asked me to open the garage. I was like, why? He was like, well, she reckons there's a cat in there. And we hadn't opened the garage for 3 months easily because it had been over the winter. And he was like, there can't be a cat in there. And he opened the bloody garage and there's a black cat sitting in the garage, just sat there, that just walked out. And it's the neighbour's cat. Had only been missing a day. We hadn't been in the garage. How did it get in the garage? I just don't understand.
I love this.
And I was like, Emily, like, that's not funny. So then the next morning when I took Morgan to work, I drove down the town and I pulled up behind a white Range Rover that just had M on the number plate, M16, I think it was, EM16 on the number plate. And I was like, thank you. No more cats.
Wow. So had Emily always had that kind of spiritual faith, or was that something she found later?
No, Emily used to read palms when she was in primary school.
I love that.
She said there was a presence in her bedroom in the corner. It was always in the corner of the room. And just loads and loads of things. I think did we speak on the last podcast that's not gone out yet about the conversation she had with Bradley?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember whether we did, but if not, you can tell it again anyway.
Okay, so there was, even though they never met, the two of them had a bond because Bradley used to ask about Emily every day, every morning, how's Emily? And she was the same. And we used to use them to get them to take the meds. We was trying CBD oil and we said, oh, shit, I'm not having that. It's horrible, it tastes horrible and it stinks. I said, yeah, but Bradley has 8 drops of this on his tongue. So tongue was out then and she'd have 9 drops.
Oh, love it.
We had to use them. I didn't tell her when Bradley passed away because I knew it wasn't much longer before she would be passing away. So I was sleeping next to her. She was in the hospital bed and I was lying next to her, and I heard her giggling and laughing in her sleep, and she was talking to Bradley.
Wow.
And I just said, "Was you having a dream about Brad last night?" She went, "Oh, you've got to ring his mum. You've got to ring his mum. I've got a message."
Oh.
Like, oh my God. I said, right, I'll sit down for this because my legs are actually shaking. I said, go on, what's the message? And she said, oh, when we meet up, because she thought he was coming for a barbecue. We was planning on, the Hadmans coming, we're going to have a barbecue. So there was, she used to say quite often, ring Brad, see if he likes steak. Does he know steak's my favourite? Fillet steak's my favourite. Go, yeah. So she said, we've devised a sandwich that we want. And she went into great details, and she used words that she doesn't usually use. So she said, slice of bread, lashings of butter, lashings of jam, slice of bread, lashings of Nutella, bread, jam, and top it off with bread. I said, that's the sandwich we want. I went, right, okay, she ring back now. And then and tell her that that's what we've decided. I said, yeah, we'll do. So I couldn't ring her because it was like 2-3 days after Brad had died, so I thought I'd just text. That was Brad's.
But Bradley only ate jam sandwiches. And Bradley only liked a jam sandwich with lashings of butter and lashings of jam. And his brother only ate Nutella sandwiches. And sometimes Bradley would have a Nutella sandwich. So to combine the two was very Bradley. And the fact that Emily still thought that her and Bradley were going to be meeting up in a couple of days to have these sandwiches, like, she didn't know that Bradley had died. To Emily, she'd had that conversation, and it was very much a Bradley conversation. It's the sort of conversation Bradley would have held. So I'm not surprised at that at all. And then we've always been told that they're together, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been told numerous times they're together, because he did promise to wait for her. He said, I'll look after Emily.
Oh, don't.
Yeah.
Things like that are happening all the time. I mean, you do actually say on some of your Instagram posts that you have signs. You say you've come away from somewhere and you have signs.
All the time. But I think we all have that. That's an inner wisdom. That's an intuition. Now, whether you want to connect to it or how deep you go, totally up to you. But we all have it, I think.
Bec doesn't have it.
You feel stuff, and it doesn't have to be woo-woo or spiritual or deep or anything like that. It's just something that we all have.
Yeah.
It's just how in tune you are. But there's clearly, and what's happening here is the energy connection between you guys as a family, between Bradley and Emily, between why you're here now. And people often, so there was someone wanted to go back to, because I think we could talk about this sort of stuff all day. But interestingly, I think the reason I asked about Emily having a faith is because faith, religion, spirituality all seems to come up for people as we die. We seem to want to connect to something. And I think it's this idea of the unknown. Am I going to heaven? Is it God? Is it angels? Is it...
Yeah, you feel you need to be protected wherever you're going. And in order for that protection, you have to have some notice belief, don't you?
Yeah, but what I think is really interesting nowadays is that we're a lot more open to not putting ourselves in one particular box. So I've created also a spiritual care document that's free to download, which is called Me, My Care and I. And it's very much, though, about what do you believe, what soothes you, what comforts you. And it gives people the opportunity to go, yeah, actually, I take a lot of comfort from my rosary beads as well as my crystals. I want my Quran next to my bed, but I also want my figure of an angel. Or do you know what I mean? So you don't have to go, this is my faith. You just go, this is what I believe works for me and brings me comfort. And I think what's really interesting is when people get to the end of their lives, at whatever age, there is some thoughts or conversations about exactly this. And on the flip side, when it's us that are losing people, we suddenly start thinking. So again, somebody very recently used to be a devout Roman Catholic when they were younger, but as they were then at the end of their lives, they'd kind of didn't mean much to them anymore. But then there's these for the family. But if they don't believe, where are they going to go? If they're not going to go to that place, or how will I connect to them? What if I pray? And again, people that will say things like, well, actually, I believe in angels and I'm going to come back. And then you get people that are grieving going, but they've not come to see me. So the religion and faith and spirituality really get stirred up when it comes to death, dying and grief. And I think this is also something that people should talk about sooner. It's okay to sit there with somebody and go, I don't believe in God. Oh, I really believe in God. Okay. But that's great. But I think, but it's also okay to go, why is that? What do that make you? It's not okay to have a pop at anybody for what they believe, but it's okay to have conversations with people you care about and trust about things that bring you comfort. And again, that's a lot of reason why people sometimes might come to me, because they'll go, well, so you're a soul midwife. What happens when I die? And I'll go, I haven't got a Scooby-Doo. What do you think happens? We Google, we research, we read, we talk to priests or rabbis or Scientologists, or, we explore. And it's okay to do that. You don't have to go, oh, well, I was christened as a child and I've not been to church since. I can't call up Father Smith and have a conversation. Absolutely you can, if that's what you think you need.
Yeah.
So that, I think faith, religions, whatever you want to call it, whatever you connect to, if anything, and actually even connecting to nothing might be strong enough to go, this is what I believe, and give you comfort.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But that, I think, is another conversation that naturally opens up when you're faced with death, dying, and grief.
And I think there are options, aren't there, which, again, I wasn't aware of, for afterlife services that are non-religious in any way. But, I'd grown up very much of a culture and a society where you have a funeral in a church, of some description, or, within a faith of some description, and a service that follows that. I kind of... there's just so much more out there, and I think in having all of those discussions, then you can just get a lot more comfort from what's already a difficult time at the end.
What sort of ratio do you have now, Katie, of services you do in churches and or out of in alternative places?
Well, it's interesting. So as a celebrant, I'm what I call Swiss. So I'm independent. So I'm not ordained. So I can't give a service and give blessings in the name of God, because I don't have that blessing. But equally, I'm not a humanist. So a humanist celebrant is very much about the human physical body. There's no soul, there's no angels, there's no heaven. It's just a very human experience. So you've got options either end of the spectrum as to connecting with somebody to represent your person and your family with whatever faith works for you. But what's interesting is all the services I've done, I will always have the conversation with people about, are there any elements of prayer or faith? And some people don't know that I can do that. I can read prayer with people. We can read scripture. I just can't do the formal, like the Requiem Mass bits, that whole formal blessing. So people are either shocked and go, oh my gosh, yeah, I'd love that, but it doesn't feel right to go to church. Or, I don't like the vicar. Or my mum didn't like the vicar and she doesn't want to go to church. We want to have a celebrant. Great, but I can still incorporate religion and faith that works for her and for you. But interestingly, even the people that go, don't want any religion, no prayers, absolutely not, that's not us. And I'll go, okay, so you don't want the Lord's Prayer? And they'll go, of course we're having the Lord's Prayer. Because again, whether it is this assumption that we have to have something, because what if?
It's a fear. Do you think it's a fear inside? Oh, I've got to have that.
I think it's a fear, and I think it's also a fear of breaking tradition. It's almost like superstition. And interestingly, with the people that go, oh, I don't believe any of that crap, but yet they will still have it just in case. So, but it's all okay. That's okay to have prayer or a hymn or something religious just in case, if that's what you want. It's okay that you've never been to church your life, but now your parent, for example, is dying. They went to church and you don't particularly want one, but you know that they would want one, so you're going to have one just in case. That's okay to do that. So you can do so much with faith, religion and spirituality in a funeral service if you so choose. But equally, you can have absolutely nothing as well.
It's all so interesting, isn't it? Is there anything, you've been doing this work for the last 11 years, what would you say are your sort of biggest take-homes? What's really changed your outlook on life and death the most? What are your biggest things that you've learned from other people?
Human beings never fail to surprise me. And obviously it sounds cliche, but you realise how precious and short life is. But I'm smacked in the face with it daily. So I do feel that I have that extra deeper understanding of really how precious life is. So it helps me personally. It helps me be very present. like literally present, where I can shut off everything else that's going on and just be with my son or my partner or my family or my friends or on my own, actually. So dealing with death and dying for all these years has enabled me to live a healthier life. And as far as the takeaways, the level of hope that we seem to still have, even in the most dire of circumstances, honestly warms my heart. Like, it is ingrained in us, no matter how much we think it's gone. And it sounds so cheesy, but the hope and love, like what we end up doing for people when we think we never could, what we endure with people when we think we never will have to. Again, as you guys, prime example. But for anybody that's going through a dying journey with somebody they care about, the love I see is unbelievable. Like, and I think human beings are inherently good people. Sometimes people think I'm naive, but to have that fluffy view works for me. But I see the goodness in people. It's a very slippery slope, but I've dealt with a lot of situations where maybe people aren't very nice. They've done very bad things and there's not very nice relationships. There's still something within us as human beings that allows me to have faith in humanity, even in the really difficult times. And I think one thing that I constantly end up having the same conversation with people is exactly everything we've said today, and it's about talking. Like, you cannot avoid this. And there's that famous saying, isn't there, by John Underwood, who started the Death Cafe movement. Talking about sex won't make you pregnant. Talking about death won't make you die. And it's so true. And I see the weight and I don't want to say negativity, but the challenges that come when you don't talk or when you avoid it, or when somebody says, oh, no, I don't, oh, no, we won't go down that road. What are you talking about that for? Things get brushed under the carpet. One of my mantras for me in life, personally and professionally, is I don't do bullshit. So I work very openly, very honestly. There's nothing I won't talk about. And if something challenges me, I'm working on letting the emotion flow. And if I don't know answers, I find out. I work with stuff. I'm all for opening cans of worms, because I see the healing and the magic and the hope and the love that comes out no matter how difficult it feels. But that's also what's so great about the Soul Midwife movement, is that actually there's 1,000 of us all over the world. So if people think, I want a soul midwife, I just want that person that's going to be by my side, I want someone to help me, but actually Katie is not my cup of tea, that's fine, because there are plenty of other soul midwives with different characters and personality and energy and faith and experience. That we can find someone for everyone.
How does it feel for you if you support somebody through sort of an end of life journey as a soul midwife, but then they don't want you there, they choose not for you not to be there, or for whatever reason you're not there at the end? Do you feel like you don't get that closure? Do you?
I'm human. Yeah, there's an element of that. However, this work is not about your ego. And again, what I've learned...
But that's still hard to detach that as a human being, isn't it?
It is. But again, working with the dying for 11 years, I see and feel the sacredness of death. So I'm always reminded that this is not about me. And whether I have my own supervision, my own support network, my own therapist, so if there are things that I need to process and work through, I'm also emotionally aware enough, which I've had to learn to be able to go, I can't let this go. Like, this is sitting with me. What am I going to do with this? It might be a walk in the woods. It might be a therapy session. It might be a bottle of wine and Netflix. It doesn't always have to be something deep and meaningful, but I will allow that and sit with, why can't I shift this?
That's really good.
I'm so grateful, though, for the experience I have, because every death teaches me exactly that it's not about me. And I have been heavily involved with people, and I've been there almost 24/7. And then they died the moment I left. And that's a big thing for people when they have held vigil, or they've been there and then the person dies when they pop to the loo, they go for a fag, they have a coffee, whatever, they make a quick call. And people are like, oh my God, and I've had that, where and personally, and again, professionally, where I have been wanting to be there. The family said, we need you here. Then I feel I've let them down. I feel that I haven't fulfilled my role. It's bigger than us.
Yeah.
It's way bigger than us. It's way bigger than that I'm allowed to grieve, and I'm allowed to have that feeling, and that's valid for me. The family that's a valid feeling to go, why did they go then? Why did I miss it? Why wasn't I in the room? It's one of those things that no one can ever explain. But I do think that when I sit and think about how much bigger this is than us, Whether you look at it from a science, from a consciousness, from a religious perspective, whatever, it's huge. And maybe that person chose to go. When maybe they chose to go when there was no one in the room, when the air and the energy was peaceful. Maybe they didn't want their person to experience it. Maybe it's a dignity thing. Maybe it's a conscious choice. Maybe it is God that picks our time and it's nothing to do with us. Maybe the angels came whenever they came. Maybe someone's dead relative needed to come at that point because they had somewhere else to be. So there are a million things. Maybe that's just when the body stopped and it wasn't anything bigger. It was just mechanics and science. It's all bigger than us and it's all out of our hands. So again, that's a big thing I've learned myself, and it helped me detach from that ego side of my work, because of course it's there and I'm human and I am a character. So ego is part of also what I work with. My ego is what allows me to show up on social media. My ego is what allows me to stand in front of people and train them about death and dying. But when I'm with the dying, my ego has no place there. And I've learned that. And I can...
But that's really good. But then on the flip side then, with the whole egos, personalities things, what have people taught you in their last moments? I would imagine most people have regrets and wishes, and what are the common, what is it we're all supposed to stop doing, that we're all going to regret in our final days?
Swearing. It's swearing. It's the F word.
Is it swearing, is it?
That's the F word.
Is that what shortens my lifespan, is it? Good, I'll keep swearing some more.
So you say that. Actually, the thing then when you said that, I thought one thing that people wish they did more was express themselves. So actually, swear. And I know I've done it myself. I'm a character. So I've had that thing where I've been told I'm too much, or you can't say that, or no, Katie's not right for that. She can't go in and talk about death to a dying person. And actually, that's exactly why they called me. But do you know what I mean? So one thing people often say is, it's all the I wish. I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd have done that. And it revolves around themselves. I wish I'd let myself be happy. What's really sad is, and I did a post about this recently, was a couple of same-sex couples where the person's died or dying, and they've only just found love, or they never found love, or they lost their love because they couldn't be true to who they are. They couldn't express themselves. They couldn't love freely because of their society or their family or the culture around them didn't let them be who they were naturally meant to be. So I think the one thing that's taught me is you've just got to be you. You only get this shot consciously.
Yeah.
Maybe you get more, but that's our again conversation. But right now, in this human form, as you are on a daily basis, you only get that day, that moment. Then when that moment's gone, you get the next one. So express yourself and be truly you. It's actually the most powerful thing you can do, because then I think when I think back to people that I've had those conversations with, because not everybody has deathbed confessions. It's not everybody suddenly goes, oh gosh, I must confess. Some people just, they die and it's peaceful and it's okay. In fact, not most deaths are peaceful events. It's the run up that's difficult, but actually the deaths are peaceful. So not everybody has this, big elaborate, oh my gosh. And actually for the most part, when I do have those conversations, there's always it's the classic, why did I work so much? I wish I'd made up with my person. I wish I had a chance to do this one more time. But I think some of those wishes you're never going to get, because, for example, my friend that died, she desperately wanted to get to a place near the sea where she loved. She got too poorly. So though that you could say that's a regret, she was always going to want one more time. That's just the very nature of dying. So not everything is a huge regret either. Sometimes things are just I wish, and they just are. We all wish that she got there, but she just got too poorly. So it doesn't always have to be the big things. Actually, it's the small things that we carry. And what they can do as we go through a dying journey, and I touched on it a bit earlier, if we don't express ourselves, or there are things, trauma, wounds, childhood stuff, especially for the older generation, our grandparents' generation that went through the wars, the elderly generation now that, went through stuff, women that would have given up children because they were, born out of wedlock, or people that saw their friends and family being killed in the war. All of those things, they weren't supported with their mental health to talk about anything. It was just, well, you get on with it, off you go, next war, next person, back in the house, another child, that stuff, or the stuff that causes us upset or trauma or just uncomfortableness within our lives. Those things, my son calls them bruises on the soul, which I love. The things that give us bruises, as soul midwives, we call them soul wounds. but actually they can just be bruises. And we sometimes they go quickly and other times they stay for life. If that stuff comes up as we die, that can play a part in what I call total pain and terminal agitation, which terminal agitation is a clinical phrase that refers to the time, normally kind of in the hours and days before death, where people just literally feel exactly that, agitated. They're up, they're down, they're hot, they're cold, their arms are up, they're sitting up, they're lying down, they're the bedclothes are up, they're down. They might be seeing things, there might be bugs, they might be picking at things. It's that general uncomfortableness. It's a very common phase of dying. But the total pain is something that people could experience because they maybe don't want to die. It's emotional pain for whatever reason. Maybe it's the soul wounds, maybe it's the bruises, maybe it's just fear of death, but it can cause this total pain that sometimes the medicine doesn't quite cut. And that's when we know that it's probably something deeper than a physical. It can manifest physically the same way it can for us. If we have anxiety, we get a dodgy tummy. If we're stressed, we have a headache. Our body responds to that emotion. So there is physical pain. But if somebody's riding around saying my head, my head, my head, and they're maxed out on whatever pain medication and they're still not settled, more often than not, that's when we start to dig a little bit deeper and think, actually, are they experiencing total pain? It's emotional, spiritual discomfort. Maybe it is about faith. For some people I've spoken to, once we've had the priest in and they've had sacrament of the sick, they've calmed right down. I'm not saying that works for everybody and it's not that simple, but, it could be that actually connecting to something that isn't medicine to give them comfort and support can help that underlying total pain and cause a lot and help a lot more with comfort and support. So that total pain and the terminal agitation can cause a real tricky bit about dying towards the end. And also, again, it's those bruises, it's the wounds, and it's also the lack of conversation. I should have done this. I should have said this. I'm not ready yet. But suddenly it's where the body starts to take over and our soul or our spirit goes, oh, heck, hold on. Like I wasn't quite done, or I should have done this. And that's, that when all that stuff bubbles up. So it's tricky. And there's no right or wrong to that bit either. For some people, they're just a little bit unsettled for a couple of hours and they're fine. For other people, it can be quite, they can be quite demonstrative with it. They're up and about and it's a very physical.
And oftentimes it can be more traumatic for the people that are witnessing it as opposed to the people that are experiencing it too, can't it?
Absolutely, because sometimes people aren't aware or they're not at that level of consciousness going through that total pain or terminal agitation, which can happen at the same time, but it can be a very, there's a lot happening at that point. But they may not be aware, and maybe medicine does calm them, to a point, but physically they're not quite settled. And maybe consciously, again, whether it's a spiritual or scientific thing, they're elsewhere. But you're absolutely right, Bec. It's for those of us that are witnessing it that you feel helpless and you think, I should be doing something, and it's hard.
I don't think it calmed. The medicine didn't calm Bradley because Bradley did experience that, didn't they?
I can say everything you just said is what Bradley went through, and no amount of medicine calmed him. And I mean, he was in the hospice for 4 weeks, and it probably started the week or so before we went into the hospice, which was why we sought out going to a hospice, because he'd got to a point where we couldn't do enough for him anymore. And I mean, he was on. They kept saying he's on such a high amount of medication that he shouldn't really be engaging with us, and he hadn't slept. He didn't sleep in those 4 weeks. He probably slept 3 days, if we were lucky. He was just he was highly agitated, but like you say, there were a few things that calmed him, and the chaplain prayers, Reiki, all sort of things. When he had Reiki was the only time he slept, and the minute the Reiki finished, he woke up. He would only sleep through Reiki. Yeah. So we had to do Reiki every day. These poor people, he used to have, 2 or 3 different people come in because it was the only time that he would calm down, and we couldn't get him to calm on any other. And like, he wasn't flailing, like you say, like he was just internally agitated,
unsettled. He wasn't happy.
He was just scared.
And that's the other hard part about that. No matter the age, no matter who it is, when you know a person you love is scared and you can't do anything, this is also just a really harsh reality. And I can't really offer any words of wisdom other than the fact that it is natural to a point. something that does happen on a regular basis with a lot of people, but it's not regular for your person, so that doesn't...
No, I mean, there was lots about Bradley's end of life that wasn't normal, like they say that they stop eating and drinking. He only stopped eating and drinking because he got pneumonia, otherwise he was still eating and drinking. Literally 3 hours before he died, they came into his room and said, Bradley just been to the toilet. He just asked to go to the toilet. And they said, well, it won't be any time soon then because his organs haven't shut down yet.
And sorry, I was just going to say, what's interesting is with Bradley, though, it was brain cancer, wasn't it? And this is what, it's the same, it's not the same. We see similar things like this with people with dementia. So if you think the brain tells the body what to do. Now, and he had a young body. So the rest of his body was naturally thinking, well, I need to keep eating and drinking because that's what I'm built to do because I'm only young and I need strength. It's the brain and the tumour and the cancer itself so all of his organs are not dying. As in, they're not old, they're not frail, they're not worn out. The rest of his organs are processing in a healthy-ish way. So it's quite normal that we would see young people still eating. And even with the going to the toilet and things, because again, his bladder, his bowels, the muscles wouldn't have gone like they might do in somebody or maybe somebody that had been poorly for a long time. So even if you had somebody that was 40, but they'd been ill with cancer for 10 years, their body gets so tired. So the same muscles that cause incontinence maybe when we're 80, 90, doesn't always happen, but the natural part of that, with the muscles becoming weaker, we don't always see with younger people for that exact reason, because the body is still young. It's unfortunately just that brain, and what often happens is it can either be prolonged or it can be quite sudden, because when whatever's going on hits whatever part of the brain and it goes, I can't do it anymore.
See, he didn't do any of that slow breathing like they said either. They said that his breathing patterns would change and he'd start sleeping, and the only reason he was sleeping was because he would only sleep when we literally put him to sleep, and as soon as the medication wore off he was awake again, and he'd only been asleep about 3 hours because we'd just given him really high doses of the medication because he'd been so agitated. So he was in that stage of sleeping through the medication, as we used to see, and we were expecting him to wake up again, and he literally just stopped breathing. He didn't do any of that slower breathing, that they told you to anticipate. There was no slow. It was literally, his breathing was erratic, but it had been for ages. He was breathing really fast and really heavy and really loud, and it just stopped. And, as much as we were anticipating, we knew he was going to die. Nobody knew he was going to die in that moment.
No, and I think that this is again, like all those things you were told are normally really helpful because they are very much the key things. And actually, I'm really glad you were told them because these are the things that can help. But equally, when it's difficult situations, or again, like I said, with somebody with dementia, for example, I've looked after people with dementia who are actively dying and going through all of those phases, and the breathing's change and the periods of apnea, which is where you get gaps in between breathing. And what often happens is you'll get the gaps and they get longer and longer, and then that person normally breathes in and then that's it. But those gaps can go from 5 seconds, 10 seconds to maybe even a minute or two, with no breath. But I've seen people at that point with dementia, and then one lady I looked after, she was up having her hair done and a cup of tea the next day because the brain is doing something completely different to the body. So in Bradley's situation, his illness took over and his brain just shut down and stopped. It just couldn't do it anymore. It just stopped. With something like dementia, the brain's just the same way, doing its own thing. The body is ready to die. It's stopped, it's done. But the brain goes, oh, hold on, what were we doing? Like, where were we at? So the brain is such a powerful thing. And again, there's not a right or wrong. I don't think there's a better or worse situation. But it is fascinating in a way, though. Again, the power of our brains, the power of the mind, our emotions. But this is another reason why it should all be talked about, because it doesn't always go textbook. It doesn't always follow that kind of dying trajectory. There is some, but it doesn't always go that way.
And it's the same for the kids. All of the kids used to say, well, what's going to happen? And when they'd come into the hospice and see Bradley upset and agitated, and Bradley would always say as they went to leave, can I say goodbye and I love you because I'm not going to see you again because I'm going to be dead.
Wow.
All of those things are really hard for all the kids to get their head around. And so I think all this education stuff that we were talking about is just really important.
Oh, it's so important. And I think for kids, they need to be, like, we talk about kids being resilient. And they are naturally more so than us adults. But actually, resilience is a skill. And I talk about this a lot. We need to allow children to learn the skill of resilience. But if we completely shut them away from death and dying, we deny them that growth. They need to learn how to sit with those difficult emotions. And no matter how much we want to avoid it, like, they will be affected by death. For the most part, children's experience with death is normally a grandparent or a pet. Mostly, obviously not all the time. But that's a great way. But actually, even when the harsh reality of life hits, we can't, because we suddenly go, well, this shouldn't be happening, or this isn't right, or I'm not ready. We go, right, no, you sit over there, because we think, one, I can't worry about you right now. Two, I need to protect you. And three, you couldn't possibly handle this. And while all that is okay and absolutely instinctual as a parent, we're doing them a disservice in a way. So I think, but to have your kids part of that, I think as challenging and heavy as it is to hear those things and them trying to process it, I wonder if it'll be one of those things that as they move forward with their own grief journey, when they're older, they will have that gratitude of being present, even though it was difficult. Because all kids want to do is be with the people they love. That's it. That all kids worry about is being with mum, dad, brother, sister, nan. They just want to be with their people. And the moment we shut the door, maybe we are protecting them in some really difficult situations. We all know our little people. Again, there's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. You've got to do what's right for you. You know what your kids can and can't handle. But we need to then switch it to, is this now something we can't handle? We can't assume that they can't. But the moment we shut the door on them, they start making up their own story. They create their own narrative. And it's the same with any childhood of kind of trauma or upset or experiences. If they're challenging, we come away with a lot more stuff than we need to. Abandonment or rejection, or I did this wrong, or are you now going to die? Am I going to die? But, they start, because kids' imaginations run wild. So if we shut them out, they go through that process. Their journey with grief is then very different, actually, and probably more challenging for them going on to later in life than it would be if we were to let them experience the challenging stuff now. And they need to go through that to then be able to learn that resilience and that emotion and how you handle the shit show that life can be sometimes.
Yeah.
When they're older.
And resilience is a skill, isn't it? It's something. It's not something you learn via an education. You learn it via a practical. You have to do it to learn it, don't you? Unfortunately, it's not just something you can read on a piece of paper and think, oh, I can do that. It's something you have to sadly be a part of and practice, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think with kids, we can't underestimate them, because when my son's gone through, my son knows all about what I do. We share a lot of the time. Sometimes he'll come out with stuff and he'll be like, so when you die, I'm going to do. And other times we'll talk about something and he'll go, I don't want to do this now. And I'll go, okay.
I think I read a story somewhere where your son said he was going to put your ashes in a magic 8-ball. I love that.
Yeah, that's it. So he said, so then when I've got stuff to do, I can ask you a question, and I could be like, oh, should I go to the pub or do my homework? And it could be like, no, do your homework. So yeah, I think we're onto something there. But so he's really open, but equally when he's not open and he goes, I can't do this now, or I see him getting upset, I go, okay, and we leave it. I'm guided by him. But what's really interesting is when he's gone through stuff, like there was something at one point, a couple of years ago, he had a little girlfriend and she dumped him. He's only 12 now, mind. But I heard this wailing coming down the stairs. And as he came further down, and he threw himself on the sofa next to me going, and he was like, oh, she's dumped me. And he was sobbing. And part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to cry. And my heart broke for him. And I found myself like shushing him and wanting to, then I started to feel uncomfortable. And then I was sat there and I was like, and he looked at me and I went, sucks, doesn't it? I was like, I can't fix this. I can't, he needs, he's had his little heart broken. I mean, it lasted all of a day. But, he had his little heart broken in that moment. And even that, I just sat with him. I didn't tell him, I didn't go, it's all going to be okay, because that would have invalidated his feelings in that moment. So I was just like, it sucks and it's horrible. Do you want a hot chocolate? What can I do?
Yeah.
So I posted something the other day about grief and about fixing and things. And someone said, I'm not broken, I'm sad.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And we often try and fix people's grief or challenging emotions because we don't know how to deal with it. So our instinct is to, don't worry about that. Look, tomorrow's a new day. And we do it with dying people. And it does infuriate me when people are dying and they'll go, oh, do you know what? I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And the family, because they feel uncomfortable, understandably so, then go, Oh, no, stop talking like that, Mum. You'll be fine tomorrow. Look, you've had a good day. What are you upset about? Or don't talk that way. You know I don't like it. Or you can't say that. You'll upset Dad. It's us, and it's natural, and we all say things like that. But what we are doing then is invalidating that person's experience or their emotion. And it's the same with grief. You know, when we try and shut it down or move it or shift it and put it somewhere that we feel more comfortable, we're not actually allowing people to just have the process and the feeling that they're having in that moment.
It's just weird and contradicting and conflicting and confusing and, you know, a bit like the whole dying process. Don't feel at all equipped to deal with it or prepared for it. And, you know, we just, the whole experience, right from the kids being diagnosed through to living, through to dying, through to after their death, the grief, the whole thing is just dealing with it as we go. I don't think we're prepared for any of it.
And you know what? I don't think you ever are. But this is one thing I think we need to talk about, is the fact that I can provide the death education. I can provide nursing homes, care agencies, people, families, all sorts. And I can go through the whole dying process, eating and drinking, what happens to the body. I can do all of that. You're still never prepared to lose somebody that you love.
Yeah.
And you're still never prepared for grief. You're still never prepared for what's going to hit you in any given moment. From one day being fairly calm and you being okay to the next day being absolutely hideous, but then the day after you have a great time and then you feel guilty for having a good time.
But there is that difference with having the education of to be able to have the foresight or the hindsight to say, I've read that, I've heard that, I recognise this, so that you don't feel quite so scared in that moment.
And this is what I think is the awareness, isn't it? This is why we have the conversations, is to have the education. It doesn't make the grief any less heavy, but it adds to the extra bits that come then around grief by knowing and understanding and going, oh, hold on, I don't need to worry about this because actually this is the natural bit and this is hideous and I hate it and I want to change it, but I understand there's nothing I can do now.
Yeah, makes you less scared, less alone, less broken.
Yeah. Look, there was something recently. So when people die, if they go through that kind of more of a trajectory, if you like, their hands and feet can go cold because essentially all the energy comes towards the body, like the centre of the body and the organs, and people's hands and feet can start to look a little bit blue or purple. It's called mottling or cyanose, and it's very much a circulatory thing. And because they feel cold. Some people won't know they feel cold. And it's a bit like when we're born, as babies, we can't regulate our body temperature. It's the same kind of thing. Some people won't know that their hands and feet feel cold. And someone will come and go, oh, Mum, your feet are freezing. And she'll go, are they? And they're quite happy in bed, very comfortable. I always say to people, by all means, if you want to put a hot water bottle or a wee tea or electric blanket around your nan's feet, by all means do, safely. By all means do. But bear in mind, you're probably not going to actually warm her feet up. And that simple bit of information was all anybody needed recently, because they were so worried that Mum's hands and feet were freezing and she kept trying to cover them up and then her mum would push the duvet off. Just understanding about the body temperature and actually then being able to hold her mum's hand rather than going, come on, Mum, I'll warm you up. Actually, she just held her hand. She put her bed socks on and a little one of those Teddy Wheaty things that you stick in the microwave, put that by her feet. She felt better for doing that, but to just know that she was never actually going to warm up Mum's feet was all she needed to know. And it's those little bits of information where I hope to help with this education program, because it's all the human stuff. And that's the stuff I talk about. There's no jargon. You hear it from a doctor or nurse, it sounds totally different. I don't have that medical background or training, but I've got that 11 years of seeing people die and understanding what a dying.
But I think in our experience as well, the medical professionals don't always have that full understanding and that training themselves. It's, that's a whole other episode too, but it's really lacking. It's really lacking there as well. The understanding, the empathy, just the education, full stop, really. It's not very forthcoming. So that probably leads me on to my next question I probably have for you. So with your course that you do, who kind of takes your course? Is it medical professionals? Is it, people like Karen and I? Who's your course designed for?
Well, interestingly, that's one in business. They'll say to you, what's your demographic? Who's your audience? My audience is everybody. It's human beings. So the kind of tagline for the course, is death education from a human perspective. So I've designed it in a way that you could listen as somebody that is dying themselves. You could listen as a family member or person that is supporting somebody who's dying. You could listen as somebody that has experienced somebody that's already died to try and understand what it is you may have witnessed. But it's all the information you need in there as well if you are a funeral director. So funeral directors see dead bodies all the time. Do they understand what happens to that body to get them there? Nursing homes, lots of people go into care with no experience of death. They don't know what to do when a person starts looking different, why their skin changes. And hospitals, doctors, exactly like you just said. Actually, there's nothing in the NHS, a training. So my training is the only training of its kind because everything else is clinical. So unless a doctor has support to have those difficult conversations, they don't get trained to do that. They don't get trained to go, actually how to effectively communicate with compassion and empathy from the heart to go, I'm so sorry, but
we don't do that, no.
So my course, hopefully, I've had GPs, paramedics, funeral directors. They've done the course, no matter with all the expert knowledge, and gone, I never thought that. So a bit in the course, I talk about the senses. So what people are hearing, smelling, seeing, feeling, and as they're dying. And it was a GP that turned around to me and went, I never thought about death that way. And this is what it is. If you have a narrative, you have an experience, you have an education, or you've got letters after your name, whatever it might be, you are then channeled to think about death that way. What I'm trying to do is open that up. I'm trying to just open it up so everybody can see the humanness of death and dying, how a lot of it is very natural. Our bodies are very instinctive. They know how to be born and our bodies as women know how to birth. The cells know what to do to create this body. They also know how to stop. They know what they're doing. So this is the thing, when we can get our head around that so many things that are natural, like the not eating and drinking in some situations, it's in our nature to feed. And as a society and community, it's what we do. We gather around food and drink, and it's a big part of our day and our routine. When somebody stops eating, all hell breaks loose because we think, my God, I'm starving them. Why aren't they eating? You need to eat. You need to keep your strength up. So it's shifting the narrative from, your person's not dying because they're not eating. They're not eating because they are dying. So it's that whole shift. And it's all those little bits that if we can help and educate people can sit and be more present with death. But the course is for everybody for all of those reasons, because you don't get told that stuff.
I think it's great that, you're doing it and that you're educating these people, because from lived experiences, both Karen and I have experienced situations where it's needed, right?
Yeah. People go, yes, we need to do more, but then no one's actually doing it. So you get somebody like me coming along, a bit like a bull in a china shop sometimes, but going, yes, okay, I'm here, let's do it. And they'll go, oh, I need to make sure they're okay. And by all means, of course, take it. So I'm all for ruffling feathers. I'm trying to break down doors. I'm trying to cut the red tape. I just want to be out there to give this to people in a very human way. And when I do this training face to face and I have these conversations, that there's a lightness that comes out of people to go, I was carrying that because I remember that with my nan and I didn't know what to expect and now I get it. Or actually my person's really poorly, but I feel better knowing that actually what they're going through now is kind of normal. They've lost their mojo. They're not going out as much. I actually understand that I've got to let that be because they don't have the energy. I'm going to stop waking up my husband and keeps falling asleep at meal times, worried he's not going to sleep at night, and just understand that a dying body is very fatigued. Do you know what I mean? All of those things come out of these conversations, and so therefore it doesn't matter who you are. This training applies to everybody. Sorry, I get very Braveheart about all of this stuff. Yeah. I say that. God, just noticed the time.
I know, I'm going out on a date night.
Oh,
yeah. Where are you going?
My husband arrived about 4:00 this morning to Spain, so I've been not seeing him for 9 days, so we're going for a curry.
Oh,
I'm not counting my calories tonight.
Oh. That's what you're going to be stuffed. They'll take your stuffing out later on. Don't worry. Anyway, you'll be fine.
Sorry. There's so much of a euphemism in that I'm just not even going there. Right. Did you have any other questions on your list, Karen?
I know. I just wanted to say I love the post you did about a hug, having a hug.
Oh yeah, 12. I think we all need 12 hugs. I think for growth.
Yeah.
8 for maintenance, 4 for something. Yeah, it's important. But that's the other thing: human connection. Human connection through death, dying, grief, bereavement is so important. Not everybody's a hugger. Not everybody wants human touch. But actually, to have a human connection, to have somebody look at you and go, "I'm so sorry you went through this," and just mean it and be with you and look at you, means so much.
Yeah.
Can make you feel a lot more connected in amidst that grey, that moment, that glimmer that you might get from another human being that just says, please call me if you need anything. I don't know what to say. This sucks. I feel a bit awkward, but I want you to know I love you and I'm here. Sometimes that is all you need, and that gives you that little glimmer to go, I can now take another step forward today.
Although that whole please call me if you need anything for me is one of the most frustrating.
It's quite vague, isn't it? Okay, call me if
I would never do that. I would never ring anybody. I would actually rather somebody just came in and said, okay, I've done this, and just take control, because I am never going to ring you. I am never going to give you something to do, as much as I might need it. And it, it's actually, especially in the early days of grief, that's like, oh my God, that's another thing my brain's got to think of. I can't do that as well.
Really good point. It's a really good point. Actually, and my friend of mine's going through stuff, and I messaged her yesterday, and I actually said to her, please call, you know where I am. And I said, but I know you won't.
No. I was going to say she won't. You've just got to turn up with the food. Do you know what my friend used to do for me when Bradley was ill, was just before he went into hospice? Every day on her lunch break, she would just come. She worked quite local to our house. She would just come to my house. She'd come in, she'd clean, she'd cook, and she'd leave. Sometimes she didn't even speak to me, but sometimes she'd come in and she'd say, have you eaten? And I'd say yes or no. And sometimes she'd say, I'll sit with Bradley, you go and eat. Or if Bradley was asleep and I was sitting with him and she didn't want to disturb him, she'd just come in, clean my kitchen, make me some food, leave it on the side and leave. Like, no expectations.
I think the doing, isn't it, is more powerful. Just the little things. Just dropping off some flowers even, or just leaving something on the doorstep, making a pot of big lasagna and leaving it outside.
Certainly don't ask me to start thinking, and coordinating stuff, because I can't do it. I can't even do it to get myself dressed. I certainly can't do it to tell you what to do.
It's like when he says to you, isn't it, how are you? Like, where do you even start to answer that question? I always try to ask things with a bit more purpose, like, how are you today? Or, what's happening for you right now? Where are you?
Yeah.
Like, just
because they are a lot easier to answer, because it's you can just narrow it down. Otherwise, it's too broad.
Because I do think people don't know what to do with grief. When people, will walk across the side of the street. People will avoid mentioning your person, and because they know how heavy it is. And actually, most of the time, it's done out of love. I think it's really incredible what you do, but I just think from doing the work that I do, I'm constantly trying to think, like, I know I said it a lot tonight, I said about people, but I'll say family, but I try and say about people, your person, because actually not everybody's a loved one. And even family doesn't mean that you like them or you even love them or want to spend any time with them. So, the language we use around death, dying and grief is so important. So I think we all need education and reminding sometimes about things that are really helpful and the things that really aren't.
I think that because Karen needs to go off on a date to get her curry.
She does.
Then I'll probably say thank you so much for joining us. And I could sit here and talk to you all night, to be honest. But, we have to end the podcast somewhere, sadly. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time. And, we'll definitely catch up again. And I think Karen and I will do your course.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and sort of gained knowledge and wisdom today. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure our listeners have found it all really interesting too.
I hope so. No, thank you for getting in touch and having me on. I honestly think it's incredible what you guys are doing, using what you've gone through. I think the connection I can feel is incredible. You said about Bradley and Emily, and there's definitely more at play here. So I think you're going to do, for the greater good,
watch this space, as they say. We're coming to get you.
But you'd rather not be here at all. You'd rather not be in this situation. I think the fact that you are now in this situation together doing this, I think you are going to help. I know you're going to help more people than you even realise. So I'm really glad to be part of here and to have met you both. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that.
Thank you. Karen, I'm going to let you do a tagline quickly, and then you can sign off and go for your curry.
Okay. Grab yourself a cuppa, find a comfortable spot, and we'll journey through grief together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.